Hello everybody, this is Rob, the Baseball Time Traveler. Thanks for joining me today. We're going back to a special time in baseball history. We're going to look at Lou Gehrig's beginnings. Going back to 1920, and we're going to cover through 1925, and then in a follow-up video that I hope to present on April 30th to commemorate Lou's final game in baseball. So let's get started with today's. Lou was born on June 19th, 1903 in Manhattan. In the upper right there, you see a book cover, The Lost Memoir. This is a book that I have, and I refer to this book quite often as I go through some of the stories here. And what I found that there's a lot of conflicting information sometimes that I found from the memoirs versus what was actually recorded in baseball statistics and so forth. But for the purposes of this video, I definitely want to focus on Lou's recall. You're going to see some of the language that he used, and he was such a good man, and I want to honor him and let the story tell itself. So we start here in the Sandlots of 1915, and Lou loved to play baseball. He played with what he called kids teams. This was before organized Little League, and oftentimes they would play in empty lots or on street corners, and they would have to keep a couple of kids out of the game for a while to keep watch for the police because it was illegal to play in the streets. And here's one of Lou's classic quotes. I guess every youngster who ever tossed a ball or swung a bat has dreams of someday breaking into big league baseball. I know I did. Lou went to high school at the High School of Commerce, started there in 1917, and he ended up being on the football team as well as playing on the baseball team. There was a reference that he was also a soccer player, but I could find no documentation supporting that. So we're just going to focus on his baseball and his football exploits in high school. Now we move to Cubs Park, which 6 years later, this is 1920, but in 1926 or 27 it was renamed Wrigley Field. So everybody knows this particular ballpark. It's historic. And this is Lou's first known appearance in a national newspaper. And this occurred on June 19th, his 17th birthday. This is in 1920. And this was written by James Crusenberry of the Chicago Tribune. He says, "The New York boys have a 17-year-old boy of 190 pounds on first base who is a regular Babe Ruth. If he gets a high fast one, he'll slam it over the right field wall at the Cubs Park." Now, what is the prelude to this is that Lou's high school team won their local championship in New York City and was invited to Chicago to play in a national championship game against the champions of Chicago City. And this game took place on June 26th, 1920. The gentleman pictured there to the left is former President William Howard Taft, and there's a reference that he greeted the boys, but it's unclear whether he actually attended the game or not. But I thought it was pretty significant to have a former president greet two high school teams to watch a high school championship. And this took place on June 26, 1920. Here's a picture of the game in progress. Probably not the game itself, but it's a photographic representation. In the top of the ninth inning, Commerce led 8-6. That's Lou's team, when the 17-year-old Gehrig came to the plate with the bases loaded. A hit would put the game out of reach, but Gehrig didn't get any old hit. Rather, he hit the first pitch over the right field wall and out of sight, a grand slam, and a monumental one at that. Apparently, that was only the 19th grand slam hit in Wrigley Field or Cubs Park at that time. Here's some of the press clippings that were written about Lou following the game. In the Chicago Tribune, Gehrig's blow would have made any big leaguer proud, yet it was walloped by a boy who hasn't yet started to shave. The New York Daily News, the bright star of the Intercity Game was Babe Gehrig. Here's the box score of the game, and if you notice there, below the all caps, you're going to see Gehrig swats homer with the bases loaded. The name is misspelled, but his box score essentially reads 1 for 4, the grand slam we just referenced in the ninth inning. He had scored 3 runs, 4 RBI, had 2 walks, and 12 putouts. a very productive game, and this team won the national championship. The New York Times recorded it the next day. So more national news for the boys. The New York Daily News, got a little pictorial there. If you look in the lower left photograph there, it'll say OU Babe Ruth GEHRIG. So the comparison with Ruth and GEHRIG had already started in 1920, and the victors were welcomed back to New York. Now we zoom in on this, and if you look at the gold stars there that I have, off to the left, I've essentially taken the same text, and I'll read it to you. The bright star of the Intercity High School Championship played in Chicago was Louis Benora, first baseman of the High School of Commerce, who made a home run with the bases loaded. Now what has happened here is that they obviously mixed up Lou with one of his teammates, a guy by the name of Bunny Benora, who you'll see in a few minutes here. Here's a nice team photograph of the Commerce team, national baseball champions of 1920. Lou is depicted there in the middle row, third from the right, seated. Here's what I was talking about with Bunny Benora. Here's Lou playing football in the fall of 1920. Bunny Benora and Lou GEHRIG were mainly responsible for the Commerce victory. Lou graduated from the High School of Commerce in January of 1921. January 27th. And he entered Columbia and was there on a football scholarship, but in the spring he played for the baseball team, but due to his freshman status, he was ineligible to play against other college teams at that point. He could play in some exhibition games, and as a result, he drew some attention of some pro scouts. And the pros, one of them, I don't recall the name, one of them suggested that he play a little bit of semi-pro ball or minor league ball during the summertime to hone his skills. And Lou took that advice ill-advisedly, if you will, and played under assumed names. And here's a couple of examples. He played as Lefty GEHRIG and Lou Lewis, and this was in the summer of 1921. Unfortunately, Lou's exploits were detected, and he essentially was banned from playing any baseball or football for a year due to that. And here's a picture. I couldn't find Lou in this picture, but this was out of the Hartford Times of June 14th, 1921. And Lou is somewhere in that grainy black and white photograph. So he sits out a year, and then in the fall of 1922, he joins the Columbia football team as a varsity player. Here's some photographs of Lou in his football gear. Then in the spring of 1923, he was able to rejoin the Columbia baseball team and was a pitcher and first baseman. He was known for his hitting tremendously, but he also proved to be a very competent pitcher. Now we move to April 18th of 1923, and this is a historic day because this is the opening of the day of the house that Ruth built, Yankee Stadium. And the Yankees were playing the Red Sox. And here's a photograph of Babe and leading his teammates into the stadium. And as might be expected, Babe Ruth christens his stadium with a home run that day. Now, here's a card that many of you are familiar with. And this is a card that I'm very pleased to have acquired just literally yesterday. And I'm going to give you a look here. I also acquired the sister card, the football card. And I'm really, really blessed to have this card. I think it's a beautiful card depicting Babe Ruth. Although Babe's name is not mentioned on the card, we all recognize that famous swing. On the same day, April 18th, Lou is pitching for Columbia. And he ends up striking out 17 batters, and I believe he hit 2 home runs as well that day. A Yankee scout was on site and convinced Lou to come down to the Yankee offices, and over the next week or so, discussions were had, and Lou ended up signing on or around April 30th. There's a little dispute, little ambiguity on the exact signing date, but for purposes of this, I'll put down April 30th. And the reason why I put April 30th is because I did see it recorded, and the significance of this is that Lou's final game, which you will see in a follow-up video here in a few days, is April 30th, 1939. Here's some photographs of Lou in his early days with the Yankees, 1923. Here's Lou is receiving some advice from Babe, and I thought this was a great line. The Babe was the first to give me advice about keeping in condition. And here's a quote from the Babe himself. "Listen, Lou, don't be a sap. Keep in condition. Don't let yourself get soft. I made a lot of mistakes when I was coming along. I didn't eat right. I didn't live right either. Later, I had to pay for all these mistakes. I don't want you to do the same thing. Just take a tip from me and tell the party guys to sell their papers. You'll be a lot better off." Babe Ruth made $52,000 in 1923. Lou Gehrig made $2,400. On June 15th, Lou plays in his first game in Yankee pinstripes. This was at Yankee Stadium, and they beat the St. Louis Browns. As the story goes, Miller Huggins was very hesitant to put Lou in because they had a very solid first baseman, a mainstay for the Yankees for many years. But they did insert Lou into the lineup in the ninth inning, and Lou took a grounder, safely stepped on the bag, and recorded the final out of the game. And that was Lou's first appearance in a Yankee uniform. 3 days later, he got his first at-bat against the Tigers. He was pitch hitting in the ninth inning of the game. The Yankees were beaten badly, 11-3, and as might follow, Lou struck out. Now we move a couple of weeks later. We go to Sportsman Park in St. Louis, where the Yankees are facing the St. Louis Browns. The attendance that day was 10,000. The Browns were putting up pitcher Elam Van Gilder, who had at that point had amassed a 5-9 record for the season. And Lou records his first hit as a major leaguer. He was a pinch hitter against the Browns, and the same day, Babe Ruth hit 2 home runs off Van Gilder, Elam Van Gilder. Now here's where the story varies a little bit from Lou's memoirs, but I'm going to read them anyway because I want to give due respect to Lou. "It was some days later before I got a chance to hit again," referring to hitting in St. Louis. "This time we were playing St. Louis, and Elam Van Gilder was pitching. Miller Huggins, sent me to hit with a man on second. Elam sent up a fastball, and I gritted my teeth and swung. That time I got a hold of it and bounced it off the right field walls for a double. The runner scored, and as I slid into second, I can remember thinking to myself, well, there's one they can't kid me about." Believe me, I've never got more of a kick out of a hit in my life than I did with that one, my first safe blow in the big leagues. And ever since that day, I've had a friendly feeling for Elam Van Gilder. He probably doesn't even remember the day or the game or the fact I was sent up to hit, but I do, and I'll never forget it because it was my first big league hit. And for the record, we'll just take a quick look at Elam Van Gilder. I don't have his baseball card from back in the day, but this is a 1992 Conlon collection card. Now, Lou stayed with the big club for a couple more months, but then in August was sent down, and here's a quote from Lou. "The toughest news that can come to any big league rookie is the news he's being shipped to the minors, or the bush leagues, as the fellows call them. Believe me, it takes a heart out of a fellow." But Lou actually benefited from going down to Hartford, and he was able to hone his defensive skills, which is really what Miller Huggins was looking for. There was no doubt that Lou is a terrific hitter, an awesome hitter, but his defense was really lacking in his knowledge of the game and how to run the bases and so forth. Needed to be refined, and he was not going to get that by sitting on the Yankee bench. Once Hartford's season ended in early September, Lou went back up to the big club, and on September 27th in Fenway Park, with an attendance of 3,000, he faced a pitcher named Bill Piercy, who had been a previous pitcher with the Yankees, but now Bill was with the Boston Red Sox. Lou proceeds to hit his first of 493 career home runs. He went 1 for 2 with 2 runs scored and 2 RBI. And the Yankees ended up winning the game behind George Pipgrass, who will be later featured in one of Lou's games. And here's the card of George Pipgrass, a 1933 Gowdy. And I couldn't find any photos that would really accurately depict Lou at Fenway Park hitting a home run, but these were at least give you some sense of what it was like. And here's Lou coming across the plate after hitting a home run. He ended up playing 13 games in 1923 and 10 in 24. And as I talked about, really spent his time at Hartford working on his skills. And he's depicted with the Harvard team. There's a picture of him in the lower left. And they had won the Eastern League in 22 and in 23. And here's a larger photograph, 1924. Now we move to 1925, which is a historic year as far as Yankee baseball. The Yankees had been playing horribly in 1924, and at the start of the season, Miller Huggins, the manager, decided that it was time that he needed to shake up the lineup. And one of the first and most major shakeups to the lineup ended up being the replacement of Everett Scott with Pee Wee Weininger. Everett Scott is a name that many of you may know. He held the former record for the most consecutive games played, 1,307, and Miller ended that streak in early 1925. Pee Wee came in as a replacement, and this was part of an overall strategy that Huggins felt the Yankees were horrible in 24, weren't showing any signs early in the season of improving, so it was time to change the lineup. Another mainstay for the Yankees for many, many years had been Wally Pipp, and most of you have heard the story that Lou replaced Wally Pipp, but Wally was really quite a solid ball player, and there was a reason why he stayed with the Yankees for as long as he did. He led the American League in home runs in 1916 and 1917. He teamed up with Home Run Baker, and this was before Babe Ruth came along. But in the early 20s, from 1921 through 1923, he teamed up with Babe and Bob Musial, Joe Dugan, and Wade Hoyt, and they won 3 consecutive pennants and then won the 1923 World Series. So Wally Pipp was no slouch. Moving on to June 2nd, 1925, as a furtherance of the strategy that I talked about there with Miller Huggins, we're now in a situation where Wally Pipp was really having a pretty poor start to the season, and this was an opportunity for Miller Huggins to really take a charge and make some changes. Now, we've heard the stories about Wally Pipp that he had a headache and requested some aspirin, so he sat down for the day. Another one was that he had rubbed lime in his eyes during batting practice accidentally, and it temporarily blinded him, so he stepped away. Another one was that he was suffering from a hangover. Another one was that he wasn't even in the stadium. He was off gambling at a horse track locally. So either way, what I came up with was the most credible story, and this really, frankly, was based on Lou's recollections and statements that were made. "You're playing today, Lou. I'm putting you in regularly. Don't be worried if you boot one, and don't get excited. Just do the best you can." And this was from manager Miller Huggins. That afternoon, Benny Bengo, Howard Shanks, Ernie Johnson, and myself broke into the Yankee lineup. So we had 4 brand new starters in the game. Talk about a swing, literally, in the lineup. After 3 years of waiting, my dream had come true. I was a regular big league ball player at last. Later that Tuesday afternoon of June 2nd, Lou had 3 hits, scored a run. He was batting in 6th position, and the Yankees won 8-5 over the Senators at Yankee Stadium. The following day, further discussion with Miller Huggins. You're my first baseman, Lou, today and from now on. In 1925, Lou batted .295 with 20 home runs, 68 RBI, and played in only 126 games, but those were 126 consecutive games on the way to 2,130, 16 years later, when he played his final game on April 30th, 1939. Now, to commemorate this, Topps made a card in 2015. And there's the card. And I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to remind you that I will be doing a follow-up on this video, and we're going to cover really the bookend of Lou's career. Having covered the beginning today, we'll cover the final game and follow up after that. So I look forward to seeing you all next time. Again, thanks very much for watching.